Hey Les, how are you?
I am good. How about you, Maria?
I'm good. Can you tell me why you think you and Sean have been such a good fit together?
Really good question. Probably don't have time to get into it. I think, and I always go, Sean and I are still, I call it active duty, right? So we probably haven't sat down and said, okay, let's really unpack this. Let's reflect on it. But at the end of the day, I think we both have efficacy in what we do. At the end of the day, we probably both have egos, but we put those aside and probably, for good and for bad, let our, let's call it workplace professional identities be represented in how the Rams do, kind of that we then me. And then at the end of the day, I think, hey, we're both decent human beings. We both really, really respect and care about people. That doesn't mean there are not going to be times where maybe we have to call someone in and cut them, let them know they might not be the best fit for the Rams, but doesn't mean they can't be a fit somewhere else. Things like that. So I think it's a combination of all of those things, but I can't say it is one of those relationships uh, that over the last 10 years doing hard things together has really evolved into one of the more special relationships that I know I and will ever have on this planet.
When you think back to when Sean first came in, how has he changed over these last decade? Or what's the biggest changes that you've seen?
Let's take football aside. It's interesting again being on active duty and not really sitting down and reflecting what all he's accomplished. But I know seeing when we won our 10th playoff game before age 40 and some of that stuff came out, you're like, wow, that's definitely unique, or I say that definitely rare territory. Uh, Again, he earned an opportunity that we gave him, and he made the most. But if you talk about changes, when we first hired Sean, I go there. I mean, he wasn't even his brother wasn't married. His brother got married. His brother and his brother's wife had a baby. Sean became an uncle. Then Sean became a husband, and now he's a father. His parents, Tim and Cindy are grandparents. So a lot has occurred in those 9 years, and I think if that would have occurred in any of our lives, and a lot of us on this call, it has. You know all the changes, right? The evolution that occurs for a human between age 30 and 40, doing all that he's done and packing it all into that decade per se.
Thanks, Les.
Sarah?
Hey Les, do you expect Matthew to be back next year?
You know what? We're going to let Matthew decide. I think we've had productive conversations with him, so we're going to give him his space, uh, right, to, let's call it, recover, rejuvenate, and then determine, hey, do we want to get back on this horse again and go chase, earn, grab special moments together?
What does your process look like as Matthew has been, you've talked about how he's been kind of a year to year decision every year. What is your process like as you build the team, knowing that post Matthew, you'll have to find the next quarterback? What does that process kind of look like for you and your group?
At the macro level, I think when Matthew's on the horse, we go, let's make the most of our time with Matthew. And we're well aware that there will be a time where we have to transition. So you kind of do both at the same time, uh, because there will be two different teams with or without Matthew, obviously, with the position he plays and how important that position is and how well he plays it. But at the end of the day, we try to keep it simple. Let's make the most of our time with Matthew, and then when the time comes that Matthew says, you know what, enough's enough, then let's be prepared to transition from there.
When you look at your roster construction, what are the biggest ways you guys as a team have been able to remain a contender after winning the Super Bowl?
I think I think there was no. I would say this. Sean and I would tell you we're probably not rocket scientists. It wasn't this major elaborate strategy. I think what we were able to do, simply put, is we were able to keep a lot of veteran pieces together on offense, which allowed us to really tackle, remodel the defense. And that I think that helped. And then at the end of the day, you always at that point, let's go, especially when we can be a little more strategic, specific, when it comes to let's say signing unrestricted free agents, making trades, signing free agents from the outside, because those players typically have experience. Their skill set is well defined, and their roles are more specific. And you tackle. But from the draft perspective, it's been going back to what Aaron Donald mentioned when we started this whole process. Number one, let's make sure the players care about being a really good football player and being a part of a team. And at the end of the day, let's try to find good football players from there. And in the draft, you can't really get too specific on positions, because you go to make a pick, and there'll be players at certain positions that you wish you could have drafted, but they're not there anymore. Someone else took them from you. So you then pivot and pick a player from another position.
When you mentioned remodeling the defense, what did hitting on Kobe and Byron in that 2023 draft do for you guys as you built your roster?
That was really big, because I think we've said it in these settings before. We knew that Aaron Donald was going to be moving on, and we also knew that you probably couldn't say, let's just replace Aaron Donald. Even if you tried, that's probably very, very hard to accomplish. But we did still want to be a team, right, that disrupted from the front. So we knew we weren't going to be able to replace Aaron Donald. We were going to have to definitely, let's call it remodel, build, keep adding to that defensive line, to that defensive front. Still be a disruptive front, just do it in a different way.
Thank you.
Stu?
Les, how's it feel to have signed a multi-year contract extension with the organization and continue on as you have with the way you've been able to contribute to it?
The opportunity to continue shouldering my responsibility along with Sean, along with Kevin, Tony, for Stan, for Josh, for his family, for the Rams, in a city like Los Angeles, this opportunity of a lifetime.
And then kind of along the lines of what Sarah was talking about with that 23 draft class, obviously there's several guys who are extension eligible this offseason. Just have you had any preliminary conversations yet with Steve, Byron, Puka, Kobe, any of those guys, and what maybe does that timeline look like as of right now?
I think that the timeline with those players, obviously we've chatted with them a lot of times. That's been during the season, right after the season, not necessarily getting right to the nuts and bolts of the business side of it. I think we will, as Sean mentioned the other day, we'll take some time. Unlike Sean, I'll try to recover and rejuvenate. But along the way here, as you take time again away from the grind a little bit, we'll be in conversations. We'll have some macro level thoughts on how we want to go forward. But I do think we naturally will tackle players whose contracts are expiring first, right? And then at that point in time, either try to bring them back or either communicate with them that it might be time to try different chapters. And then with that being said, you go in through the draft and through the whole process with those type players. We're well aware that we have another year with them. We're well aware that they're very good players, and we'd like to continue riding with those players into the future. And then we begin working through that with all of them.
And then lastly from me, just where does Warren McClendon potentially fit into that picture, just as Rob weighs his future and from what you saw from Warren this year when he stepped up in his place?
Warren's a success story, both individually and for the team. He came in and he played his role as a backup, sometimes active, sometimes not active. Worked on his trade, worked on his craft, got a more consistent opportunity this year when Rob was struggling with the injuries, and made the most of it. And again, going back to probably Sarah's question earlier, that's always on the back of our mind in terms of when we do remodel, rebuild, add players through the draft. Is there will be times where I forget where we took Warren. Maybe it was in the fifth that year. You probably know better than I, but with some of those players that you take on day three, number one, you pick a player that cares like Warren. He's someone who probably started as a true freshman at Georgia at one of their tackle positions for a really good team, and then you put him in our ecosystem. They work with our coaching staff. They evolve, they develop, and when the opportunity comes, they make the most of it. And he's done that for sure.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Adam.
Les, Tony talked publicly back in 2024 about planning for when this winter came, when the 2023 class would be eligible. What kind of work have you seen him in the front office in general do to make sure you had the appropriate cap space for this particular offseason?
I think Tony, Matthew Scher, and Ishan, the group that really spends their working days engineering that and strategizing and applying that strategy. I think they've done a nice job where we are definitely set up. We have room. We can begin making some of those decisions.
And just kind of generally, what has the 2023 class meant for the reimagining of this roster the last 3 years?
That class, that's an interesting question. Again, being on active duty, haven't probably reflected enough on that. Here's what I do know about that class, and it's probably the first time I've thought about it on this call is that class when they were drafted, I'm not sure when they got their name called by the Rams that they were like, okay, we're going to be part of a remodel. I do think they were probably like, wow, a well-established NFL organization just drafted me. So I think they were jacked to get their name called, jacked to come to work. Not sure they knew what, let's call it what kind of pressure might be on them based on the side of the ball they were playing in terms of, like we've talked about, that defense kind of growing together on their rookie contracts, obviously sprinkling in some players on their, that are more experienced, more veterans with them. But to see them shoulder that load, that responsibility in a meaningful way along the way, that's pretty cool for them.
Cornerback seems to be a position that's kind of in flux this offseason, just given some of the contract statuses of guys in that room. How do you view that group entering the winter?
Yeah, I think that's a group because of the contracts expiring, even again, how many years they've been in the league is definitely something we got to sit down and maybe, let's call it, stabilize it more from a standpoint of getting the right people in under the right contracts and things like that, based on how many guys are up or voiding and things like that. So it's something it'll be a position group that we'll attack over the next few weeks, few months.
What have you thought about, Emmanuel Forbes' growth since he's been with the organization? Have you guys started thinking about his fifth-year option?
We definitely know, we're well aware that's a possibility to check the box or not. And it just in terms of Emmanuel, he was someone that, again, was released. We thought, okay, based on how we viewed him coming out, that it would be a nice experiment to bring in, similar to all the players we do. A lot of times when they first get here, I call it the first day of school. They don't know anyone. They're not really sure of the system, but we put them in, they dive in. If they care, they evolve. And he's definitely someone who's shown the willingness to learn our system, to try to execute it to the best of his ability on game days.
Thank you.
Nate.
Hey, Les, good to see you. I was curious about Sean said a couple days ago that he's not yet over the loss in the NFC Championship game. So I'm just curious kind of how you look back on that game and just the body of work you guys put out this season as a whole.
Yeah, I think the 2026 season, that's always a tough question in the present moment. And you start, let's go back to when this thing starts, right? You start in August and there's 32 teams. And whether it's August into September, October, November, December, January, you're going to grind it down to from 32 to 14 standing. Then it'll go to 8 standing. Then it'll go to 4 standing. Then it'll go to 2 standing. And then there's 1 standing. So in the present moment, right, when there's 2 teams still standing and there's 1 game to go, probably the void of not being in that game weighs a lot. But I do think our 2026 run to the Final Four, to being one of those, you start at 32 and being one of 4 teams left standing, I think time does put that run into its proper perspective. And being someone in the building who's been in the league 30 plus years, maybe right at 30, maybe getting to 30, I've often said as painful as that loss is, because you're that close, when it's all said and done and you put your career in an Excel spreadsheet and you sort it from best to worst, probably the moments where you got to the conference championship game are going to be closer to the top, depending on how your career's been. So, but again, I think it takes time for that type of runs perspective to settle in and be kind of properly recognized. But what you always want to do, because you're in active duty, you're always like, okay, how do we start over, begin the next run? Those players in the locker room, they're special humans, and they put a lot on the line, starting even before August, but let's call it August, or a little bit late July when you show up to go through that journey from 32 to 1.
And specifically with Matthew, just when you think back to kind of what he was going through in training camp, trying to get on the field, just what do you think it is about him and maybe the situation you guys had around him that not only let him get back out there, but put up arguably the best season he's ever had?
That I think we've discussed a lot. I think I mentioned, I don't want to get into that just now, kind of when he was going through that, and myself kind of called him in and said, man, you went in the Freddy Krueger mode. But I think to play the position like he does for as long as he does, and as long as he has, it definitely, I can say this, you can probably wake up and do your normal off-season day at a certain volume. But when you get close to, like we mentioned, August, and then we get close to September and we start keeping score, a starting quarterback, has got to turn up that volume. It's a different volume than a lot of us walk around with, and it's a different volume than a lot of us actually have. And he was able to turn that volume up and go play. And the really, really, I call it one of the more fulfilling moments that had nothing to do with winning or losing a game this year, was just seeing how fun he had, how fun his wife Kelly had, and those four girls. As the girls are getting to an age, right, to see their dad do something that only so many people on this planet can do.
And lastly, for me, just when you talked about walking that line between, building for the present and looking to the future, how did you kind of manage that line this past season and building this specific team? And do you think any part of that process needs to maybe be different heading into next year, building next year's team?
Yeah, I think going back to what I mentioned earlier, if Matthew decides to come back, I do think, and I don't know how much it weighs and how you balance each, because we definitely think about, and there is a vision to have sustained success over time. There's a balance there, but if Matthew decides to come back, I do think there will be an element where, okay, whether it's 51-49, whether it's 52-48, whether it's 60-40, let's definitely make the most of the time we have with Matthew, because as we just discussed, the type of season he had, the type of season that he's still showing that he can have, there's only so many of those left. So those are some moments that you want to take advantage of for sure.
Wyatt.
Hey, Les. Knowing that you guys have two first round picks this year, do you do any prioritization in terms of, scouting and preparing for those picks? And uh, if so, how do you do that without sacrificing the work that you guys do on in the later rounds, considering how much success you've had with those late picks?
Good question. I think, especially, I can't say this. The one thing that is different, you try not to do. You try, as you mentioned, you don't want to do anything so different that okay, now the let's call it having success in the day three, some of those later picks, somehow that process suffers. But I did what we did change a little bit is once we knew right about where we were going to be picking, uh, there was a group of us that really got in the lab and said, okay, let's focus on the players that we subjectively think would be in play at what ended up being 13, right? So long story short, you can definitely go, hey, we need 13 players that we would pick at 13. Again, that's subjective. It's not going to be right. It's not going to be league wide. Each team's different. So, once we did know right about where we were going to be picking, a group of us went in the lab and said, let's make sure we get 13 somewhat solved, or at least to the 90 to the 95% place in terms of prep. That way we can spend right these next few months really doing what we normally do. And now we just have to get Sean and his coaches, up to speed. But what we'll be able to do is let's tackle this kind of let's call it threefold. Let's tackle 13 first because that's a little bit more strategic. You don't have to come up and then let's go to the second pick in the first round. That's a little bit harder because you can't just go, oh, let's have 30 or so players, and then we'll focus on that on those day 2 and day 3 picks like we normally do.
And when you're talking about those, 13 players, how much do those evaluations change as you go through, the combine and some of the meetings that happen in the pre-draft process?
I think they'll, my wife, Kara, has a saying, right, you may change in degrees, but not kind. So if one's winter, we're not going to change it to summer. But you might change it from 42 degrees to 39 degrees if you get the metaphor, analogy, whatever I'm trying to say. So there will be some changes. There will be some late data come in, but we did try to get it to, the 90 plus percentile in terms of, these are probably more than likely the players that we as the Rams would be picking from. And at that point in time, you just don't necessarily know if we call it our top 13. And there'll be a few more players that we'll look at in that bunch and whittle it down. But at that point, you got to pick one of those 13, or you got to trade back or trade up. So we'll get into those questions later, I'm sure.
And a few years back, when you guys, kind of restructured the run game to have more duo, do you recall some of the conversations that you had with Sean to kind of figure out what you needed to do as a front office to support that restructuring?
Yeah, that's definitely anytime we go through, let's call it a schematic change or evolution, you definitely want to be on the same page because you're right. Not every player's skill set fits every scheme. That's one of the more complex, let's call it dynamics in terms of NFL football is not every scheme is the same. There's some fundamentals that are very, very similar, but not every scheme's the same. So you want to definitely make sure you're on the same page. And then you got to get your scouting staff on the same page and we go from there.
Gary.
Hey, Les, thanks for doing this. In terms of Matthew, if I'm not mistaken, last year that you guys came to agreement on March 1st. Are you looking at a similar kind of timeline in terms of how long this might go on?
I think all of us want it to be shorter than last year. And I think that's been our vision. That's how we set it up. That's how kind of when we went through last year and we said, hey, do do we want to continue, right, working together, partner gathering, chasing, right, grabbing, earning those special moments together? We definitely wanted to set it up where it wouldn't be a drug out timeline. And the main setup is giving Matthew, right, the proper, let's call it space to recover a bit, rejuvenate a bit, and determine, hey, that's yes, I want to put my mind, body, and soul into this again, because he's the one with the toughest position of the group trying to decide.
Well, is it as simple as him saying, I'm back? Because given his performance this year, an MVP caliber performance, and it being a year-to-year thing, do you anticipate a request for much more compensation? And are you prepared
at this
for
point, I think it's the first part of the equation is simple. Hey, I want to be back, and let's go chase, grab, and earn those special moments together, and then we'll go from there.
In terms of compensation, Puka, Nakua appears to be a guy who's in position to be among the highest paid, if not the highest paid receiver. You guys have not had a situation like that for a while, where you've had a drafted player who's, in position to do that. Is that process different than, what you're going to deal with maybe some of the other guys who obviously are looking for good contracts, but does Nakua fall into a different category? And in terms of priorities, in terms of getting it done, where does that fall?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Those are, it seems simple, right? If you're one of the best at what you do, and obviously he's evolved into one of the best. Seems like, okay, that's a pretty simple contract, because it's pretty self-explanatory where you fall in the ecosystem and the hierarchy. But there's also so many variables. There's other players whose contracts are up. Maybe there's so many variables that go into that make it more complex than it would, seem on the surface level. So again, similar to a few players we've had in the past, like you said, that have been at that level in the ecosystem, you got to begin communication and begin working through it to come up with a win-win solution.
Thanks very much.
Greg.
Hey, Les. When you build a team that comes this close to making the Super Bowl and falls short, or winning the Super Bowl as you did in 2018-19, how do you process that mentally? Do you look at that roster emotionally and say, oh, maybe I should have done this, added a cornerback, upgraded the return game? Or are you able to avoid that emotional response that fans have sometimes, those causation correlation traps that fans can fall into?
I would say rumination is contagious. So it affects me probably just as much or even worse than the fans. And yes, you're gonna always regress, and you might think about a play, but sometimes plays are random, and then you get into the more micro, more macro moments and things you could have done differently. So you go through that. Now, what you definitely had to do is, okay, at some point, recover, rejuvenate, try to be disciplined to put your amygdala in the back seat and tell your amygdala to shut up, and then use your frontal lobe a bit, because there are some lessons, like you said, that you can learn and apply. Now, you can always go, well, if we'd have done this, maybe if you'd have done that, maybe something else would have happened differently as well. So I can say it doesn't put me on the mat in terms of being paralyzed not to move forward. But like all fans, like a lot of us, when you get that close, and especially in the two games with Seattle, those two heavyweight fights, wow. From a fan's perspective, those were probably really fun games, right, to watch. But to have a winner and loser in each one, they were definitely very tough to, let's call it, be on the side of having less points at the end of the game than the other team. But much respect to what Seattle's done over the last couple of years getting to this point.
I apologize if somebody's asked you, but Davante Adams, can you quantify the impact that he had on the team as your big signing last year, and what you think the future holds there?
I think that I think the thing that comes to mind with especially probably the hardest thing to do, or one of the harder things to do in the NFL is to throw touchdown passes from inside the red zone, and him and Matthew Stafford having that connection is right takes players with elite experience and skill to pull that off. So I think that's one of the things that definitely weighed the most in terms of Davante. Let's call it joining the Rams.
Thanks, man.
We'll have Dennis, then Brock.
Hi, Les. How are you?
You know what? I was doing well until I just started ruminating again.
When you talk about culture and fit, and going through free agency and the draft, what determines a player to be a Rams guy?
I think at the end of the day, going back to what I've said before, mentioned it earlier in this press conference, from an intangible standpoint, hey, does the player care? And at the end of the day, we talk about intangibles. We like for a player, whether it's skill set or intangibles, to provide the Rams an edge, right? And you try not to settle, for either one of those, right? Bring both to the table, you got a chance to be a Ram.
Brock.
Hey, Les. Can you talk about the current rising rates of the cap and how that's affecting the Rams?
You know what? I think we all generally realize that it's going to rise. You never know how much or what have you, but you plan for it to a bit. And hey, I would say at the end of the day, it's very positive, right? That means from a holistic standpoint, the league is healthy and successful, because when the cap rises, that means right, the entirety of the league is healthy. So that is a positive thing. And then at that point, we go to work to try to engineer the as good a roster as we possibly can, within the circumstances.
And my last question is, obviously everyone talks about the Sean McVay tree when it comes to his coach assistants populating the NFL. The same thing's happening to you when it comes to executives. How has that affected the Rams' ability to draft players over these past couple of years?
It's starting with the coaches, because we've had a lot of coaches move on for positive reasons, right? It seems like just about every coordinator on either side of the ball has left here and become a head coach. And I think at one time we said maybe Wade Phillips was the only one who didn't, but Wade definitely went on to be a head coach in the USFL or UFL. So if you want to add that in his retirement chapter. But anytime a coach moves on, especially at the coordinator level, offense, not necessarily as much here because Sean's our offensive coordinator, play caller, sets the tone for the schemes we're going to be trying to attack the enemy with on that side of the ball. But when there's been defensive changes, you really have to get on the same page to make sure, right? Or simply put, right, more zone versus man. It takes, different corners to do either. And you got to be versatile as a corner. You're not going to just be zone or man, but you get the point. So you get on the same page, 3-4-4-3, all those things, so that you can truly understand what you're trying to accomplish when it comes to acquiring players. And the same goes for, on the personnel side, right? And maybe to an extent, when you lose someone mid-year, a lot of their work has been done at the 90%, but you may lose that final 10% that we talked about that'll occur over the next couple of months. And then you definitely got to make sure you have a plan in place to replace what they were doing, what they were providing, the impact they were making. And again, similar to Aaron Donald, each person's different, so you're not just going to replace them, but you definitely want to make sure you're as productive.